are 5 things you need to know at 5 on this Thursday night.
A 22-year-old Sioux Falls man is facing federal child pornography charges following an investigation by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security.
Jaden Wolf was indicted on 2 counts of production of child porn. He also faces multiple charges at the state level for related crimes. Court documents say Wolf used Snapchat to solicit images from 2 minors. Authorities believe Wolf used multiple usernames on the app. He remains in federal custody pending trial.
A 21-year-old Sioux Falls man is facing charges tonight, accused in 2 separate armed robberies. Police arrested Samuel Roberts last night shortly after a robbery near 41st Street and Sertoma Avenue. In that case, police say Roberts entered the business wearing a ski mask, indicated that he had a gun, and demanded money. After his arrest, investigators found that he matched the description of a similar robbery on Tuesday night.
We got great information from the public with description of the suspect, description of the vehicle. That information led our detectives to do, obviously, what they do best and develop suspects in these pretty serious crimes.
Roberts is charged with 2 counts of first-degree robbery. He also faces a weapons charge because police found a gun in his possession.
Noon tonight in western KELO. After years of hoping and planning, South Middle School is taking major steps for a brand new facility. Members of the Rapid City School District, city, and state leaders all attended a groundbreaking this afternoon. The district is using federal coronavirus aid to help pay for the new project. The new school is scheduled to be ready by fall of 2024.
Well, Hartford is seeing a lot of business growth this spring with the recent announcement of 3 new storefronts going up in town.
The dispensary with BJ Olson and his team, and then we've just recently announced Dairy Queen coming to the community, and then we have Get and Go as well, adding a 2nd location with a car wash.
You don't need to go to Sioux Falls because you can do your day-to-day business here.
The recent professional services and other new business people living in Hartford can enjoy, and what it means for future growth in the community coming up in tonight's Your Money Matters at 10.
And finally, the 5th thing, the Augustana Choir has reached a big milestone. For 100 years, members of the choir have shared their voices making music. In April, the university will hold a 100th anniversary celebration. Coming up in tonight's Eye on KELO, we'll hear from members of the choir and what it means to them to be part of this legacy.
And now let's get one last check of our weather with meteorologist Adam Rutt.
We'll have a dreary at times start to the month of April. Some rain and even with snow showers not out of the question. Highs in the 40s and 50s. But then we try to rebound a little bit on Saturday. 40s and 50s to the east, around 60 at west. All the while we do remain predominantly dry.
Thank you for joining us.
Have a great evening.
Tonight, President Biden takes an action that no president has done before as Americans feel the pain at the pump, what it means for your next trip to the gas station. With inflation at its highest level in 4 decades, President Biden's big announcement about oil.
Our prices are rising because of Putin's action.
But will his plan help at the pump? We asked the experts as the Dow has its worst quarter in 2 years. Russia regrouping. President Zelenskyy says Ukraine is preparing for a new offensive as Putin drafts more than 134,000 Russians to his military. Severe weather outbreak, 25 tornadoes and hundreds of damaging storms across the South.
We were lucky to be alive.
Tragic school shooting. A student is dead at a middle school in South Carolina. What we're learning tonight. Chris Rock breaks his silence for the first time since the Oscar slap. We hear from the comedian what he's saying tonight.
How was your weekend?
Eye on America. With small farms disappearing, the mental health impact it's having on rural America. Peanut butter recall. Why Skippy is pulling jars off the shelves in 18 states. And on the final night of Women's History Month, meet the doctor who is a role model to many.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday night. Well, tonight, in an extraordinary move to help Americans combating rising gas prices, President Biden is going to drain roughly 1/3 of the oil reserve. That is the largest release ever. And this is only the 4th time this measure has been taken. It happened during the Gulf War, after Hurricane Katrina, and the 2011 Libyan civil war. President Biden will tap into 1 million barrels a day, but that's only a drop in the bucket when it comes to domestic oil consumption. The U.S. currently uses around 20 million barrels a day. And Americans aren't only seeing sticker shock at the gas station. The Commerce Department today said people are also paying sharply higher prices for food and other necessities. Inflation is rising at the fastest rate in 40 years. The average price of gas in the U.S. now stands at $4.23 a gallon. That's up 47% from just a year ago. And on Wall Street today, stocks tumbled to the close, with all 3 major indexes falling more than 1.5% on the day. Well, clearly we have a lot of news to get to tonight, and we'll begin with CBS's Errol Barnett at a gas station in Bethesda, Maryland. Good evening, Errol.
Good evening, Nora. Tonight, President Biden is offering gas customers like the ones you see behind me a wartime bridge, as he described.
35 reported tornadoes across 10 states in the past 24 hours. West of Tallahassee here, a reported pre-dawn tornado killing at least 2 people there, injuring 3 more. Daybreak revealing a trail of destruction. Near Lafayette, Louisiana, body camera video showing an officer racing to rescue drivers from a multi-car accident. Mississippi hammered overnight, search and rescue teams checking for victims near Hattiesburg after reports of an elderly woman trapped inside. And the storm blowing across Penn State this afternoon, those giant cranes spinning in the wind. ABC's chief meteorologist Ginger Z was in Jackson, Mississippi when the storm hit there. She now joins us from outside New York City. And Ginger, what can we expect throughout the night?
Yes, that long line of storms is crossing Scranton right now. It has had embedded severe thunderstorm warnings in it, and we should see it here across the I-95 corridor between 2 to 3 hours from now. So let's go ahead and take a look at the maps. We've got severe thunderstorm watches from Albany back to Washington, D.C. Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina have existing tornado watches, and we have seen spin-ups in both North Carolina and Virginia, so take that seriously yet tonight.
Meanwhile, drivers in Maryland and Georgia are enjoying a so-called holiday from state gas taxes.
I'm glad it's going down a little bit now.
Seems to be making an improvement.
With Connecticut drivers joining Friday, and more than a dozen other states debating this or offering reductions.
We can see an uptick.
Patrick DeHaan of the fuel data website GasBuddy measured consumption jumps as a result of tax holidays and says that's a warning.
Sheltering Americans from the consequences of high price could induce more gasoline consumption, and it could cause gas prices to go up more dramatically.
Experts also explained to CBS News that at this time of year, stations switch over to a summer blend of gasoline, which costs more to produce, likely meaning more of this.
I used to go where I wanted to go, now I go where I have to go.
Now, one thing to keep in mind is that tax rebates, if they are passed by states like California, typically come out of any tax refund you would otherwise receive. And here in Maryland, it's actually the station owners who get the tax holiday, with the state expecting those savings to be passed along to customers. So, Nora, there's just no easy fix to what continues to be an expensive problem.
Yeah, well said, Errol Barnett. Thank you so much. Well, after President Biden wrapped up his news conference today, he actually made a point of returning to the room to address Russian troop movements in Ukraine. See this? Saying he's skeptical that Putin will withdraw all of his forces from around the capital of Kyiv. The president also noted that Putin is beefing up his forces in the Donbass region. Meanwhile, Russian forces pounded the suburbs of Kyiv today. We do want to warn you that video of the aftermath is graphic. Here's CBS's Deborah Pata.
Body after body pulled from the battlefields of Irpin, the huge cost of war lining the road to the capital, and where Russia also suffered crushing losses. The enemy, they're just kids, this soldier says. They're like cannon fodder. But Vladimir Putin is not done fighting, today authorizing the draft of another nearly 135,000 new conscripts. In Mariupol, the promise of humanitarian corridors to evacuate those trapped has yet to materialize. It cannot come soon enough. Ukraine says 90% of residential buildings have been damaged.
So these are all rockets.
That destruction is just from the Russian missiles and rockets that have hit their target. The US estimates up to 60% simply don't work. Every day we get messages from citizens who found unexploded artillery, says rescue worker Yevgeny. This is a controlled explosion. Yevgeny is part of an 11-man team whose job is to extract and destroy unexploded ordnances. We risk our lives all the time, but someone needs to do this job, he tells us. They've been collecting bombs, rockets and banned cluster munitions that have been falling in city centers, backyards and even in this kitchen.
Every one of these rockets that's been found and has not exploded means that lives have been saved.
The horrendous loss of life weighs heavily on Yevgeny, and with this war, he reckons they'll have enough work to keep them busy for 10 years.
So much for Russia's claim it will drastically reduce operations around Kyiv. Today it struck in the heart of the capital, and we can tell you we've been hearing air raid sirens and explosions in the distance throughout the day. Nora?
All right, stay safe, Deborah Pata. Thank you. Well, it is going to be another night of dangerous storms across several states. The severe weather turned deadly early this morning and knocked down trees and power lines and damaged homes and businesses across the South.
Here towards the north of where we're standing, you can see there deep dark smoke rising into the sky. Now we're not sure what's been hit.
Later in the evening, another strike on the same area. No word yet on what the target was, but this was very close to the city centre. Another strike near Kharkiv, this time on a gas pipeline, leaving multiple fires burning. This verified video circulating online shows a crater in the ground ablaze. Russians seen here firing indiscriminately into buildings in a Mariupol neighborhood. Verified video circulated online by a journalist who's embedded with the Russian military show the intense fighting. This village outside Chernihiv now back under Ukrainian control. Residents forced to leave. Signs of Russian defeat everywhere. And this is what the fight leaves behind. In a recently liberated area north of Kyiv, graphic video shows the bodies of Russian soldiers on the ground and in the brush. And look at this damage. Many of those displaced in this war will have nowhere to return. But the ground invasion largely in disarray. The White House believes Putin has been misinformed and misled by his own generals.
I'm not saying this with a certainty. He seems to be self-isolated, and there's some indication that he has fired or put under house arrest some of his advisors.
A top British spy chief with this devastating assessment.
We've seen Russian soldiers, short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft.
It's estimated that some 10,000 Russian soldiers have been killed so far, but Russia hides the truth of this war from its own people. So a hotline at the secret location in Kyiv has been set up so Russian families can get news about their loved ones.
What it's like for you, though, I mean, how must you feel having to deliver this very, very serious news to your enemy? It must be difficult for you to kind of reconcile that, right?
You know, at first it was hard, she tells me. Even now, when I speak about it, tears come.
I can see she's getting emotional about it.
But she says she knows she's doing important work.
Amazing, those Russian families just trying to get the truth. James Longman with us again from Kyiv tonight. And James, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree to add 134,000 conscripts to the Russian military today. That's getting a lot of attention. But the Kremlin insists the call-up has nothing to do with the war in Ukraine.
Well, Whit, the draft does happen twice a year, where men aged between 18 and 27 get called up to serve in the Russian military for a year. There is no official mention of Ukraine this time, but we do know conscripts are fighting here, and a lot of young men have been leaving Russia to avoid joining them. Whit?
James Longman, our thanks to you tonight. Also tonight, the Ukrainian refugee crisis is reaching America's shores. More and more people fleeing the violence are arriving at border crossings in Mexico. Whole families camping out at the port of entry in Tijuana asking for asylum. Some are being allowed to cross under an exemption in the law. ABC's Will Carr is at the border tonight.
Tonight, Ukrainian families flooding the border of the United States. Kids, bags, and fatigued faces all packing in tight on this block in Tijuana. Some wedged into this bus station, others camping in cold, rainy conditions.
Every day it's more and more and more. There's so many babies, pregnant women, babies who need medicine.
With President Biden pledging to allow up to 100,000 Ukrainians into the U.S., the numbers in Tijuana growing exponentially. Wednesday, there were roughly 200 Ukrainians here. Today, more than 600, all hoping to hear their names called off this list. Alona Zhiknik's family arriving 2 days ago. Her kids drawing Ukrainian flags on the Mexican sidewalk while they wait. How hard has this been on you? Emotionally, it's very hard, she tells me. We haven't been bathing. It's a very hard situation. The Ukrainians have been able to enter the U.S. under an exemption to Title 42, a federal policy that's put a halt to asylum requests at the border because of the pandemic. Now, there are more people showing up than can be processed.
Tonight, with this bus station and block packed with Ukrainians, there's still far more migrants from other countries here in Tijuana. And because of Title 42, the city's shelters are jam-packed, and that's a big concern because everybody believes that this camp is only going to get bigger. With
the war in Ukraine, now a global crisis. Clear to see there, Will. Thank you. Now to that ABC News exclusive. The producer of the Oscars, Will Packer, speaking out for the first time about what happened after that infamous slap. And tonight, what comedian Chris Rock told an emotional crowd at his first performance since the incident. Here's ABC's Kana Whitworth.
Oh, wow! Tonight, one of the producers of the Oscars revealing exclusively to ABC News exactly what happened behind the scenes moments after Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on stage for making a joke about his wife, Jada. Will Packer, who led the show's first all-black production team that night, speaking exclusively to TJ Holmes, saying the LAPD came to his office and spoke to Rock.
They were saying, you know, this is battery was the word they used in that moment. They said, we will go get him. We are prepared. We're prepared to get him right now. You can press charges. We can arrest him. They were laying out the options. And as they were talking, Chris was being very dismissive of those options. He was like, no, I'm fine. He was like, no. And even to the point where I said, Rock, let him finish. The LAPD officers finished laying out what his options were. And they said, you know, would you like us to take any action? And he said no. He said no.
Packer telling ABC News he did not speak to Will Smith directly at all the night of the Oscars. In Boston last night, Rock addressing the incident publicly for the first time before a sold-out audience, fans giving him a standing ovation.
How was your weekend?
In video shot from the upper balcony, the comedian telling the crowd he has not prepared any jokes about the slap.
I don't have like a bunch of about what happened. I'm still kind of processing what happened, so at some point I'll talk about it.
And what ABC News now is working to confirm some reporting from Variety that Will Smith had a meeting earlier this week with key members from the Academy in which he apologized again. What we do know is that Will Smith will receive a 15 days notice before an official vote is taken on his violation.
Kana Whitworth for us. Thank you. And be sure to tune in to GMA in the morning for much more of TJ's exclusive interview with Will Packer in that stunning Oscar moment. We move on to Washington now and new developments in the investigation of the Capitol riot. Jared Kushner testifying before the House committee, the first Trump family member to be questioned. And it comes as we're learning the Justice Department is expanding its own investigation, now looking into the planning and the efforts to interfere with certification of the election for Joe Biden. Here's ABC's chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Carl.
Today, Jared Kushner became the first member of the Trump family to be questioned by the January 6th committee. Kushner was a top Trump advisor, but on January 6th, he was traveling from Saudi Arabia and didn't even go to the White House when he landed in D.C. that afternoon, telling one Republican congressman back then, according to a source, "We'll just get in a fight if I go over there."
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The organizers of the rally before the attack on the Capitol are now part of an expanding investigation being conducted by the Justice Department. ABC News has learned federal prosecutors are now looking beyond the rioters who stormed the Capitol, seeking information, according to a subpoena reviewed by ABC, quote, relating to the participation and/or coordination of any member, employee, or agent of the executive branch or the legislative branch in the planning or execution of any rally or any attempt to delay or influence the certification of electors. That could include people in Trump's inner circle and the former president himself. Jared Kushner's deposition today lasted most of the day. One member of the January 6th committee described it as really helpful. Of course, the committee hopes soon to speak to Ivanka Trump, who, unlike Kushner, was actually at the White House with her father on January 6th. Whit?
John Carl, thanks. When we come back tonight, late details about a deadly school shooting. A 12-year-old student shot and killed. What 15 states will tell you why.
Maybe it's another refill at your favorite.
Could potentially be targeted for indictment, but it shows that, as Merrick Garland had promised, that he's going to leave no stone unturned and take this all the way to the top if necessary, and this could be just the beginning of what will be a very long-term investigation.
Good point. Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill, thank you very much. Let's dig deeper right now. Joining us, CNN senior legal analyst Elie Honig. Elie, as you heard, we're hearing that Kushner volunteered information. You wouldn't necessarily expect someone in Trump's inner circle to be especially forthcoming, would you?
Well, Jared Kushner's in a really interesting and I think unique scenario. First of all, he's always tried to keep himself separate from January 6th. He was never a big proponent of the big lie of election fraud. He wasn't in the country in the lead up to January 6th. On the other hand, he is the ultimate inner circle advisor. He's the highest ranking White House advisor to testify thus far. And so if I was examining Jared Kushner, I would try to use him purely as a witness. What were other key players doing? I'd try to use that access. What did Mark Meadows do? What did Dan Scavino do? Perhaps even what did Ivanka Trump do? Because he has that unique insight and access. That's where I'd be interested in questioning him.
Very interesting. Our senior legal analyst, Elie Honig, thank you very, very much. Up next, Chris Rock speaks out for the first time about Will Smith's violent Oscars outburst as new details are emerging about what happened right afterward.
With my hectic life, you'd think retirement would be the last thing I'll...
Only one station offers over 6 hours of news daily. Get your news when you want it with Dakota News Now.
Dakota News Now is sponsored by Billion Automotive.
Hi, I'm
Thanks, Leland, but
hold on, but to take it one step,
be held accountable?
I'm not claiming, that's why this is a straw man. I'm not claiming that Jenny Thomas has committed a crime. I'm saying let's assume that no one has done anything wrong. Let's not use the word innocent. Let's not use the language of legality, because innocence isn't just a legal term, it's also a moral term. Okay, so I was using it in the moral level, not the legal level. But to make sure that there's no confusion here, I'm saying let's assume that no one's done anything wrong who's in the position of power, but maybe let's assume that everyone's family did something wrong. I'm saying we shouldn't hold people accountable for what their family did. That's all I'm saying. And I don't actually think you're disagreeing with me. That's the irony of this. I don't think anybody on this planet was disagreeing with me.
Leland, would you like to...
No, it's not really it's not anybody's place as a journalist to agree or disagree with the premise. You're not, sins of the father go back to the Bible in terms of who is held morally responsible, if you will. I think probably, Nicole, and as I think about what you're asking, it may be more of a media analysis question, right? Is that should the media, in a sense,
bring up bad acts of a private individual that would otherwise be completely irrelevant in the national conversation, but for that person being the son, daughter, wife, husband of a very influential person. And the reason it becomes news, and the reason it becomes news and becomes as a story in any of these cases is, does this private individual enjoy certain benefits, or have certain
But a private individual who has a lot of access that the average person doesn't have.
Yeah, and Nicole, if I may, I mean, I think that's what Leland's getting at here is how do we define accountability? I think Mark's right. Is there accountability, and then what is the accountability? It's not always just legal.
Rick, did I just hear you agree with Mark?
There's reputation accountability here. There's a political accountability. If he's over there, if Hunter Biden is over there benefiting from his father's position, and his father is not putting a stop to it, then there is a political and a media accountability to be held here. And I also appreciate Leland's metaphor being at the bar, because after this, we're all going to need to go to the bar. But I do think we're getting to the bottom of it here, and that is, should there be accountability for someone's actions if you could have done something about it, and it was your position of elected influence that was allowing them to abuse the system?
All right. Well, very good debate, my friends. We will continue this conversation. We're going to take a break, and then we'll be right back.
I'm Brian Enton.
Biden's son and brother were cutting multi-million-dollar agreements with business officials connected to China's military.
Companies led by Chinese leadership, that leadership in turn has a close connection to the Communist Party and in some respects even to the Chinese military and intelligence.
Republican Senators Chuck Grassley and Ron Johnson released documents from 2017 and 2018 showing Hunter and James Biden's financial relationship with energy company CEFC. There's an agreement for a gas project signed between Hunter Biden and Gongwen Dan, an associate of Ye Jianming, founder and chairman of CEFC. Grassley claims both are connected to elements of China's military. A bank record shows a $5 million transfer from Ye and CEFC to a company called Hudson West 3. Grassley says Hunter was an investor and manager of the company. There's a $1 million transfer for Hunter to represent Patrick Ho, a CEFC official who federal authorities arrested in November 2017 for international bribery and money laundering charges. Hunter Biden was not accused of legal wrongdoing.
I think there's ample evidence that they were trading on that name.
The White House referred Fox News to statements Joe Biden's campaign issued in October 2020. Quote, Joe Biden has never even considered being involved in business with his family, nor in any overseas business whatsoever. He's never held stock in any such business arrangements, nor has any family member or any other person ever held stock for him. As for whether Hunter or James Biden have committed any crimes, Grassley says that's up to the Justice Department. It's been investigating Hunter's international business dealings. Brett?
Rich, thank you. Now we're back with our panel, Howie, Chuck, and Trey.
Никто не ждал, никто не ожидал. Был такой ад, я вам передать не могу. Летело все, что можно лететь, через дом, мимо. Люди неделями не выходили из подвала. Неделями, как кроты.
Over 4 million people have now fled Ukraine in response to the Russian invasion. These peace talks have been going will resume tomorrow. We're going to finish a break, but when we come back, we will tell you why the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is back in the news.
It's the most wonderful time.
Silence on Will Smith's attack as we learn new details about what happened immediately afterwards. CNN's Brian Todd is working the story for us. He's getting more information as well. Brian, what's the latest?
Wolf, tonight we have new reporting on the disputed accounts of whether Will Smith was actually asked to leave after the slapping incident or not. And as Wolf mentioned, Chris Rock has spoken out publicly for the first time and dropped hints that there will be more coming from him. Chris Rock had tears in his eyes as the crowd at Boston's Wilbur Theater gave him back-to-back standing ovations. Then he made his first public comments since being slapped at the Oscars by Will Smith. CNN has obtained audio of the first of 2 stand-up shows Rock did last night in Boston. As some in the crowd shouted F. Will Smith, Rock seemed eager to move on. In his second show, Rock reiterated that he plans to talk about this incident in more detail at some point.
That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Uh-oh, Richard. Oh, wow. Wow.
Seemingly referencing whether he's spoken to Smith since the incident, Rock told the audience in the second show, quote, "I haven't talked to anyone, despite what you heard." An uncensored feed from a Japanese outlet the night of the Oscars shows how Rock and Smith reacted immediately after the slap.
Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Keep my name out your f***ing mouth.
Wow, dude.
Yeah.
It was a G.I. Jane joke.
Keep my wife's
G.I. Jane のジョークだったんです。
There have been multiple published reports disputing the Academy's claim that Will Smith was asked to leave the Oscars ceremony after the slap, but refused. But tonight, a source with knowledge of the situation tells CNN leaders of the Academy firmly asked Smith's publicist for the actor to leave, that he refused, and that message was communicated back to the Academy. Smith did not respond to multiple requests for comment today. How much pressure is the Academy under to discipline Smith in a consequential way?
I think the Academy does have to have a real definitive action here. Will they revoke his membership to the Academy, which I do believe that that will happen, and will they take his Oscar? I'm not sure that it will go that far.
Nichelle Turner says she expects Chris Rock's career to continue benefiting from this incident, and she raised the possibility of him maybe being asked to host next year's Oscars, a broadcast which she says will probably draw a lot more viewers regardless of who hosts Wolf. You can bank on that.
So what are you hearing, because I know you've been working this as well, from all the experts out there about how this is going to affect Will Smith's career? Well,
you know, it's interesting. He's an incredibly powerful figure in Hollywood. Nichelle Turner calls him the mayor of Hollywood because of how powerful he is. She believes that you may see him take a step back for maybe weeks, maybe a period of months even, where you won't hear from him. He's simply, however, too powerful a figure in Hollywood, Wolf, to really fade from the scene. He's got projects in the works. Probably his career does not get affected too much long-term by this, but in the next few months, it'll be very interesting to see how public a figure he's going to be.
What do the experts you're talking to think about this? Will we be hearing more from Will Smith anytime soon?
Well, I mean, that we may not, actually, because I think he feels the need, from what we're hearing, to take a step back. Maybe his wife, Jada Pinkett Smith, has a podcast. He may appear on that, so watch that space, because he may appear there. But it's really going to be interesting to see what Chris Rock is going to say when he comes out and gives much more detail about this entire incident and how he really feels. He didn't let on very much last night during those shows in Boston. Now, again, he may gradually say more about this in his shows, his stand-up shows going forward. But as Nichelle Turner says, when he really lets loose, Chris Rock is a very raw figure. It's going to be very explosive.
We'll see what happens. All right, Brian Todd reporting for us. Brian, thanks very much. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. I'll be back in a half an hour on our new streaming service, CNN Plus.
Exposed. The powerful held accountable with.
Goss has been combing through those documents. He joins us now with the latest. Austin, good evening.
Hey, Andrea, that's right. I've spent a lot of time combing through the documents, video, and audio files in this report, and there's a lot to unpack.
Of the world's worst nuclear disaster after they were reportedly exposed to radiation. In Kyiv, new attacks 2 days after Russia claimed it would scale back on the capital. President Biden saying there's no clear evidence Vladimir Putin is removing forces from Kyiv. And what he said when asked, is Putin being misinformed by his advisors? Also tonight, President Biden's historic move to ease record gas prices, tapping the U.S. strategic oil reserve, 1 million barrels a day for 6.
In the lead up to the crash, investigators believe that Ravnsborg was traveling slightly over the speed limit while driving home from a Republican fundraiser in Redfield, consistent with what he told them. Data pulled from his personal phone shows that he used it about 69% of the way, much of that being to call his dad. Ravnsborg's call to his dad dropped, at which point he used the internet for several minutes, before locking his phone at 10:23 p.m. Sometime in the next minute, he unlocked it to make this phone call to 911.
Allie, Allie, I'm the Attorney General, and I don't know, I hit something.
According to calculations by investigators, Ravnsborg would have seen Beaver for 2 seconds before he struck him, if he were not distracted. Days later, Governor Noem's former chief of staff, Tony Venhuizen, would ask Ravnsborg to step away, saying she, quote, believes the right course of action will be for you to announce that you are voluntarily taking a leave of absence. Those who drove by Beaver that night said that he appeared to be intoxicated. One person even stopped to check on him because he was stumbling down the road. But Trooper Burns' report ends like this, quote, other motorists were able to see Mr. Beaver on the night of the crash. Other motorists were able to see Agent Rummel as we conducted exemplar testing. If Mr. Ravnsborg is not driving on the north shoulder of the road, it makes no difference if Mr. Ravnsborg sees Mr. Beaver or not. This crash does not occur. Now, while much of the investigative report is available online through the South Dakota Legislative Research Council's website, we're still waiting for videos of the interviews that were conducted to be posted. Right now, there are only summaries of those interviews posted. Live in the Pier newsroom, Austin Goss, Dakota News Now.
All right, Austin, thank you.
Turning things over now to a check of the forecast.
Left the Chernobyl nuclear disaster site, still contaminated from the 1986 meltdown. The company said the Russians are leaving after digging trenches in the contaminated soil and receiving significant doses of radiation. The Russian military has said radiation levels have remained within a normal range in the area. But is Putin even being told? A day after the White House said Russian generals were afraid to give Putin the truth about the war. President Biden saying this today.
How badly is Vladimir Putin being misinformed by his advisors?
That's an open question. He seems to be self-isolating.
And tonight, a U.S. official tells NBC News the United States has assessed some Russian government senior officials likely disagreed with Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. Despite promises to reduce attacks around Kyiv, Russia is already striking again near the capital, destroying this warehouse. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy, who spoke with President Biden late yesterday, says he needs more American help to defend his country, including fighter jets and tanks. U.S. aid is essential for us, he said, while President Putin is making new economic threats, saying unfriendly countries, which include Europe and the United States, must pay for Russian natural gas in rubles in Russian banks by tomorrow, or risk being cut off.
Richard, the sale of oil and natural gas remains a major economic lifeline for Putin.
It does, and Europe is far more dependent on it than the United States, which recently banned it. Tonight, Germany's economics minister said that Russia could not divide Europe and that Western allies would not be blackmailed. Lester?
Richard Engel, thank you. As more people make their way across Ukraine, new and harrowing accounts from those who escaped from the most intense fighting. Gabe Gutierrez spoke with some of them in central Ukraine.
This is the heart-stopping drive out of southeastern Ukraine, as seen from the car of Olga Kachakova.
How hard was the journey from Mariupol?
It was horrible, she says. The city is destroyed completely. These are more images from her neighborhood, now a ghost town. This man, who asked us not to show his face, says he was with Mariupol's territorial defense. His hand shattered by what he tells us was a Russian grenade.
Do you think that Mariupol might eventually fall?
No, never. But he says the Russians captured his father, and he hasn't heard from him in almost 2 weeks. Here in Vinnytsia, a humanitarian hub has sprung up, of in all places, a mall. Organizer Anna Chernikova says it's already helped more than 2,000 refugees.
When people are coming, I understand that by my heart.
Because she's been through it. She fled the Donbass region after Russia annexed Crimea in 2014.
I never saw my grandma again, and she's died already.
Her brother was a young boy when they rushed out, and the psychological toll it took still haunts her.
He didn't talk for 1 year. So when I saw these children, I even couldn't recognize what it will be in future with this generation.
Olga Lysachenko came here 2 weeks ago from the Donbass region with 14 family members. The printing company she built from scratch was leveled. I don't know what to do, she says. Here, for so many, the future is uncertain, but they're holding on.
I just believe that it will be a victory for Ukraine. It couldn't be another way.
Just days ago, Ukrainian authorities say that a Russian airstrike targeted the country's Air Force command in this area. And earlier in the war, the city's civilian airport was destroyed. So officials here are on very high alert. Lester?
Okay, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you for that. Tonight, major action by President Biden to help lower prices at the pump. Energy costs have been a key factor, driving inflation to a 40-year high. And with gas well over $4 a gallon, the president ordered 1 million barrels a day released from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Kristen Welker is at the White House with more. Kristen, good evening.
Lester, this is the largest ever release of oil from the country's strategic reserve, 180 million barrels over the next 6 months. Today, the president insisted the move could lower the price at the pump by an estimated 10 to 35 cents, though he's tapped the reserve twice before with little impact on gas prices. The president also called on the oil industry to produce more oil and issued a directive to enhance production of electric vehicle batteries. We pressed officials here on how soon Americans would feel relief, and they say that's difficult to know, but high gas prices and soaring inflation have been a drag on the president for nearly a year, with the midterms looming. Lester?
Kristen Welker at the White House. Thanks. Tonight, we're watching that severe weather as it sweeps up the East Coast after pounding the South. Blaine Alexander on the destruction left behind.
It's the alarm sounding in cities across the South.
You have no time left. You need to be in your safe place.
A massive, fast-moving storm system producing more than 400 weather warnings across at least 16 states, with more than 24 reported tornadoes.
It vibrated the house. I just kept reassuring my family, we're going to be okay, we're okay, we're okay.
Officials say the storm claimed 2 lives in the Florida Panhandle and sent winds whipping through Alabama and Mississippi, destroying Teresa Love's new home before she could even move in.
It's devastating. It was going to be a home for me and my kids.
And in parts of Louisiana, still reeling from last week's tornado outbreak, another direct hit.
This twisted pile of metal is what's left of the roof here at Tallulah Academy in eastern Louisiana. Typically, this building would have been full of K-12 students. Fortunately, officials canceled classes before the storm blew through.
Bettina Finlayson made that call.
I needed to keep my baby safe, and I told him, I said, I've got to shut this school down.
Now, millions along the East Coast are feeling the storm's impact, the final stop in what's been an unforgiving path. Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Tallulah, Louisiana.
And let's swing it right now to Al Roker. What's next?
Well, right now, Lester, we've got tornado watches along the Carolina coastline into Virginia. Severe thunderstorm watches from Virginia all the way up to New York. Right now, 51 million people are at risk for severe weather today and on into tonight, especially from New York, Harrisburg, Washington, D.C., for the possibility of tornadoes, wind gusts of up to 70 miles per hour. The good news is the rain's not going to be a big problem. 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, Lester. The biggest problem, the winds over the next 12 hours, and then things finally start to calm down.
All right, Al, thank you for that. It was a warm and friendly reception for Chris Rock in Boston last night as he took the stage for the first time since Will Smith slapped him at the Oscars. Miguel Almaguer has the latest.
Greeted by a 2-minute standing ovation, Chris Rock broke his silence.
How was your weekend?
This video captured an emotional Rock who wasn't yet ready to wade into the controversy.
I had like a whole show I wrote before this weekend, and I'm still kind of processing what happened.
Rock's return to the stage comes as Will Smith faces growing fallout for Sunday's slap at the Oscars.
Oh, wow!
With new video surfacing on social media of Jada Pinkett Smith after the incident, conflicting narratives are now emerging about what happened next. The Academy says Smith was asked to leave the Oscars but refused. Today, a source present at the ceremony tells NBC News while there were conversations about asking Smith to leave, one of the show's producers ultimately asked the actor to stay. The Academy says it's begun disciplinary proceedings. Smith, who apologized to Rock on social media, hasn't responded to our request for comment.
The Academy doesn't really know how to respond to this situation, and it seems like there's a lot of mixed messaging they're trying to put out there.
But tonight, one thing is clear. For Rock, the show goes on.
Last night, we watched Chris Rock on stage say it's good to be back. He said he'll soon share the details of what happened. Lester?
Okay, Miguel, thank you. In 60 seconds, escaping the war and trying to get into the U.S. We're with Ukrainians who wound up in U.S. detention for weeks. And new revelations about the federal investigation of the president's son, Hunter Biden.
Numbers move you, but some can stop you in your tracks, like the tens of thousands of people who
are never going to own this terrain and be able to do with it what they want at will. It's going to be contested for the long haul.
Right, and of course, perhaps they thought that it would be very different, that it would be much more like Crimea. So, Jill, you know, you're also, I know, focusing very much on that, you know, that kind of connection, right? That connector between the Donbass and Crimea being Mariupol. How else are you seeing Russia prepare to take that? What are you seeing?
You know, this is so classic, Aaron. Russia has done this, obviously, in that Donbass region before, in 2014, and it has done it in Georgia, it's done it in Moldova, and here we go again. So what they are doing, there are a couple of new data points. One is, if you look at that, at the Mariupol that Spider was just talking about, the so-called head of one of those breakaway republics in the Donbass is now ordering that they have an administrative entity of some type for the city of Mariupol, which is not even under Russian control at this point. But they're already bringing in that kind of civilian hardware, let's say, for taking it over legally. And then the other part of it, not to get too in the weeds, but the Russian parliament, the lower house of Russian parliament, is now working on a bill that would declare Russian speakers globally, regardless of where they are, as compatriots. And if you call them compatriots, then the Russian speakers in that region around Mariupol would be have to be protected, in quotes, by Russia, which would give them the perfect excuse to go in there and just take it over and have all what they think is a legal justification.
I think those two data points are crucial to add to this. Thank you both very much. And as I promised, I want to go back to Fred Pleitgen because he was the first U.S. reporter to go into the war-torn suburb of Irpin and to film it with his team and his photojournalists. It became one of the hardest hit areas since the start of the war. So, Fred, what did you and your team say?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Aaron. One of the hardest hit areas, and also, of course, the area where the Russians really tried to blast their way into the capital of Kiev, but they were confronted and held up by Ukrainian forces. Nevertheless, the place still under extreme and very intense shelling. We did manage to get in there today. It was very difficult. Let's have a look.
There is no safe way to get into Irpin. The only feasible route is on the back of a police special forces pickup truck on dirt paths. But even here, the earth is scorched after Russian troops shelled the trail.
Ukrainian forces are taking us into this area on back roads because they say taking the main roads is simply much too dangerous. They want to show us the damage done when Russian forces tried to enter Kiev.
Ukrainian authorities say this is still one of the most dangerous places in this war-torn country, and we immediately see why. We are driving right towards an area engulfed in smoke from artillery shelling. This is where Russian forces tried to push into Ukraine's capital, but were stopped and beaten back by the underdog Ukrainians. The battles here are fierce. Authorities say 50% of the city has been destroyed. To us, that number seems like an understatement.
We have to keep moving quickly because this place can get shelled anytime.
Ukraine's national police now patrols Irpin again, but their forces frequently come under fire, the chief tells me. Just yesterday, our officers who were searching for dead bodies, they were shot at with mortars, he says. They had to lay under the bridge and wait for it to stop. But the grim task of finding and taking out the many dead continues. More than 24 on this day alone. Some have been laying in the streets for weeks and can only now be removed. When Russian forces invaded Ukraine, they quickly advanced on the capital Kyiv, all the way to Irpin. Here, the Ukrainians stood and fought back. Vladimir Putin's army controlled large parts of Irpin, and the battle laid waste to much of this formerly wealthy suburb. And this was the epicenter, where we find burned-out Russian trucks and armored vehicles.
So this is the area where some of the heaviest fighting took place in Irpin, and as you can see, that there was a Russian armored vehicle which was completely annihilated. We do have to be very careful around here because there still could be unexploded munitions laying around. We meet Volodymyr Rudenko, a local resident who says he stayed and took up arms when the Russians invaded. Always, there was not a single day when I left town, he says, even during the heaviest fighting. It must have been difficult, I ask. Just so you understand, he says, once there were 348 impacts in one area in one single hour. And the battle here is not over. Suddenly, Irpin's mayor shows up with a group of special forces saying they're looking for Russians possibly still hiding here. I ask him how it's going. We're working, he says. There's information that there are 2 Russian soldiers dressed in civilian clothes, but with our group, we're going to clean them up. Ukrainian forces say they will continue the fight and further push Russian forces away from their capital. The deputy interior minister saying they need the U.S.'s support to succeed. What do you need from the United States?
Everything. Military support, first of all.
Weapons to help the Ukrainians expel the invading army, they hope, and finally bring this suburb out of the reach of Vladimir Putin's cannons.
Fred, just incredible to see that. And I'm interested, when you talk about the mayor showing up and they're looking for those 2 Russians, to his words, to clean them up with the special forces. How is the morale of the Ukrainian troops? Just seeing that destruction up close, killing people, and still having to fight in their own destroyed towns.
Yeah, having to fight in their own destroyed town, and having been in that destroyed town for such a long period of time, we were really surprised to see that the morale is extremely high. And I think one of the main reasons for that is that they just feel that they had this gigantic Goliath army that was trying to, basically just punch through their defenses, and they managed to push them back. And I do think that that's something that has given them a big morale boost. I think that they've realized that they know how to fight against the Russian army. They're capable of fighting against the Russian army. But, the Ukrainians have also taken some pretty big casualties, especially in that fight north of Kyiv as well. And they're under no illusions that it's something that's going to go on. That fight is not over. There are still a lot of Russian forces there. And that shelling is certainly something that's pretty tough to deal with. But the morale was really, really high. And those soldiers certainly seem to be in good spirits, Aaron.
Yeah, it's incredible just to see that. That came across through your video, but also just that feeling of not knowing, right? That there could be shelling even while you're there. That there could be people hiding in buildings who are going to shoot at you. That's that level of existence. Fred, thank you so much. Just an incredible report there from Fred. And next, Cmgus drones. They are cheap. They weigh less than 6 pounds apiece, and they're really important. They're giving Ukrainians an advantage on the battlefield. So we have a special Outfront report on what they are, how they're being used next. Plus, a key U.S. ally now taking on a top Russian general known as the Butcher of Mariupol. And former President Trump's son-in-law testifying before the January 6th committee. It is the first person in Trump's family to speak to the committee. What did we learn?
Stackburger menu.
Flooding of volatile situations, especially Russia and Ukraine, COVID in China, that could eventually offset part of the expected decrease should oil prices suddenly reverse or the situation in Russia with Ukraine escalate.
Yeah, help us understand the world markets right now. As I said, the president calls this Putin's price increase. How much of the price increase that Americans are experiencing right now is related to Ukraine? How much is still global oil supplies and maybe other factors?
I think there's just there is some level of accuracy as referring to the last 2 months of increases as being associated with Putin. For without Putin's war on Ukraine, the U.S. probably would not have had to respond with sanctions, and so part of this at least could be blamed on Putin's move into Ukraine. Now, having said that, gas prices were already fairly high prior to the war on Ukraine. The national average was already at about $3.30. So much of the increase since that $3.30 national average is likely attributed to the war on Ukraine. But prior to that, a lot of the increase I could blame on COVID, which upended norms between supply and demand. And of course, oil prices early in the pandemic plummeted, only for the economy to recover and for then demand to recover much faster than supply.
This is a historic release in its amount. Some critics say this is not what the strategic reserve is for, that it's for emergencies. Do you think that there is enough left in the reserve to deal with any potential other supply shocks that we may not be able to predict?
I think that's certainly a point of contention, can be debated. It is a situation that the U.S. created through sanctions, though those sanctions, have plenty of merit. This is not an emergency that is unexpected. And so I would have to say that, part of me agrees that potentially this is not an emergency situation and that we leave the nation more vulnerable to if one of those emergencies does arise where we can't do anything about it. And certainly the situation that the U.S. has put us into, the administration, is avoidable. Whether or not sanctions were necessary is one thing, but this situation is of the U.S.'s choosing.
Patrick DeHaan, I see that heat map behind you. I take it that's prices. A lot of Americans want to see those colors dim in the near future, but we know you'll stay on top of it. Thank you for joining us to talk about it.
Thanks for having me.
Wallet. And Democrats in Washington are noticing they're kicking around a plan to do the same thing. Never pass up an opportunity to spend more money.
All detail records. We have to figure out what phones Donald Trump was using. Frankly, I think when you look at the testimony of somebody like Jared Kushner or his daughter Ivanka, they might have some information about whether their father actually knew what the term burner phone meant. So, I think there's a lot to be unraveled here. But frankly, we've all heard if the crime don't get you, the cover-up will. And I think this 7 or 8 hour gap is going to do so much more harm to Donald Trump and his associates than if they had just produced the calls in the first place.
Joy, can I just add that time is not on our side, because as Glenn knows, these cell phone record companies, they don't keep the cell phone records forever. Many of them, it's 9, 12, maybe 18 months. And so we have to move now because they could be destroyed just in the ordinary course of business.
And we also know that, Donald Trump flushed, paper records down the toilet and ate them. So, we know that he was not one that actually keeps records. We also know, Glenn, that he did know what a burner phone is. Per his former national security advisor, John Bolton, there was a previous lawsuit in which he actually, used the term burner phone, at least on his side. So he does know what a burner phone is. So some of that is silly. Let's talk, you mentioned Jared Kushner. What might he be able to produce, given that he was not there on January 6th physically? What might they want to pull from him?
Well, he undoubtedly had conversations with his father-in-law, and the good news is there is no father-in-law, son-in-law privilege, just like there is no daddy-daughter privilege. So when and if Ivanka is compelled to testify or chooses to testify voluntarily, there will be no applicable privileges other than the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination in the event either Ivanka or Jared's truthful testimony would incriminate them, make it seem like they committed a crime. But he undoubtedly had conversations with his father-in-law before, during, and after the insurrection, even if he wasn't present on January 6th. And, sometimes we play the telephone game when we're prosecuting, when we're investigating crimes. I want to know what Ivanka told Jared about her interactions with her father, because all of that tends to build a record, and then we can get the overall picture, you know, before we go to the ultimate target and confront them with all of the evidence that we've obtained.
Yeah, and to come to you for a second, Congressman, you know, this news that that was in the Washington Post, CNN has done some reporting on it too, that the Justice Department actually is expanding its probe a little bit to get closer and closer to the central players. You know, I know some of your fellow Democrats have been very critical. Congresswoman Lurie and others have said, do your job, DOJ. Do you feel better about what you're hearing?
I do, and these investigations take time. White-collar investigations are usually 3 to 4 years on average, but you see that both the committee, the January 6th committee, they are starting to move up the chain. You know, Jared Kushner is the highest ranking official that's been brought in so far. And it also looks like if they're expanding the number of prosecutors on the criminal side and also asking grand jury witnesses about people, you know, higher up, that they are, you know, expanding what they're looking at. Look, most of this was committed in plain sight. But it does look like they want to have some other evidence, you know, to supplement what the president's already said. 2
more quick questions for you. I'm going to stay with you for a second, Congressman. There was this pretty blockbuster ruling by a federal judge about this Florida restrictive voting law, in which he talked about our democracy being under siege and the right to vote being under siege. Are Democrats concerned that if something like this gets appealed, it winds up in the Supreme Court, where those 6 justices can just now rule, because this is involving Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, that it winds up killing the Voting Rights Act altogether?
That's right. And I would feel much more comfortable if it was in a 50-50 Senate, where Senators Sinema and Manchin would both vote to reform the filibuster and then vote to put back in place the Voting Rights Act. Because this is just, you know, the dashboard is flashing all over the country with different states where you're seeing voting rights abuses. But these judges at the district court level, they can't do much if the Supreme Court is just going to overturn it.
Let me let the two of you, you guys are kind of a buddy act. I don't know if people realize that you guys are kind of a buddy act. There's a law, I believe, that is now on the books because of you, Glenn. Do you want to describe this law and tell us what Glenn Kirshner had to do with it?
I'll give all credit to Glenn, because as a federal prosecutor who's worked on a lot of homicide cases in the district, in D.C., he told me about the angst that so many families have because of the number of cold cases, 3,000 in D.C. And so he pitched to me the idea of having a homicide victims bill of rights that would allow a family after 3 years to have their cold case reopened. It passed with over 400 Democratic and Republican votes in the House this week. It's headed to the Senate, and we hope that families will get some measure of closure pretty soon.
Have you heard from any senators, and do you think that this has got a chance of becoming law, Glenn, as you inspired it?
Yeah, well, listen, I give all of the thanks to Representative Swalwell for hearing me out on this. You know, I have all kinds of schemes and ideas, but he was willing to take it up because of his commitment to addressing violent crime. And Joy, we have more than 250,000 open, unsolved homicide cases in our nation. And that is horrific. These families sit by a phone hoping that a call will come from a detective saying, we have a break in your loved one's case, and those calls never come. And most of them are a product of gun violence. And Representative Swalwell took the ball, he ran with it, and there is now some hope that will come to these families who, you know, wait for closure in their loved one's homicide case. So I couldn't be more thrilled that this is going to become the law of the land.
I never get to report, I almost never get to do good news on this show, so I had to get that in, and the audience can decide who plays the two of you in the buddy picture. Hollywood, get on it. Glenn Kirshner, Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you both very much. Appreciate you both. Still ahead. More Republican senators now say they will oppose Ketanji Brown Jackson's nomination to the Supreme Court, despite the fact that she is ridiculously well qualified, and some of them have voted to confirm her in the past, like literally within the past year. Back in a sec.
Up, you can put yours down forever.
One of the things was a huge American air base. They got the World Cup under hugely questionable circumstances with the promise to build 8 stadiums at a cost of $4 billion, not including the $35 million for metro and rail systems connecting all of them. You can see what it's going to look like. Amnesty International reports the flashy new stadiums come at enormous human costs. They accuse Qatar of using virtual slave labor. 3,200 workers toil under the boiling sun every day to build the stadiums on a tight timeline. They're almost exclusively migrants, making pennies a day, living in squalor with no ability to leave the country. Qatar plans on using the World Cup to showcase its move into modern society as a worldwide destination for tourists. Colby Hall normally appears here as the founding editor of Mediaite, the nation's premier website for news about the news. But here tonight, he is joining us as our resident soccer fan and dressed appropriately. Colby, there's not going to be any talk of all of the problems of Qatar when all of a sudden Fox Sports is broadcasting the World Cup, is there?
I think there may be some. I think you set it up beautifully. I think, in the scale of things of corruption, world soccer, in particular FIFA, would be like the top end of the scale. There's no institution that's more corrupt. Not only did they spend a ton of money to bribe to get the World Cup there in 2022, but that followed Russia doing the same thing in 2018, and they even moved the World Cup. It's traditionally in the summer, which is a lovely time to go outside, have a beer, watch your team compete. They're going to play it from November and December to deal with the break of the heat that Qatar is known for. And the 8 new stadiums that they're building are being built with air conditioning. They're air conditioned. So the whole thing is an entire mess. It's a real shame, and there's been some cleanup. But I do think it will make some news, but people will be more focused on the sport, what's going on the pitch.
In the run-up to the Olympics, there were a lot of questions about whether or not the U.S. should participate or boycott because of the Chinese, the Uyghurs. We did a lot on it. You and I talked about it a lot. Should there be that same kind of question about whether the U.S. should send a team to support, as you just said, one of the most corrupt organizations in the world?
Well, I mean, I think there's been some thought about that. There's some conversation. Ultimately, though, you're penalizing the players. I think a better conversation would be, what role does the United States and really other sort of larger, more powerful soccer nations in Europe and South America, what role do they play in sort of framing FIFA and what they do? I know that Harry Kane is the top striker for the English team. He and the English club, they had an hour-long meeting to go over the migrant conditions. 6,500 migrants died building these stadiums over the last few years.
I just got to go back. You say it's punishing the players. There is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the United States. If as a company you go bribe a foreign official in a foreign country, you can be charged criminally back here in the United States for something that didn't happen on U.S. soil. At some point, if you're going to stand for something, you got to stand for it no matter what, even if it means that the soccer players don't get to stand in the play in the World Cup, right?
Well, I mean, I think you could probably find a statute that most international businesses runs afoul of. I think you make a salient point that the World Cup is at a much bigger scale. I think you also, there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. There is something wonderful about the World Cup that's even pure. It goes back to the Olympics of the 70s that I grew up watching, where the World Cup, as it's played, is way less commercial than what we typically see now in the Olympics with doping and PEDs and what have you. So, I mean, the World Cup is the only thing that really comes close to March Madness in terms of, and I think it would be a real shame to punish the world from this great, quadrennial tradition because Sepp Blatter was a corrupt jerk. And Qatar is sports washing. They're basically trying to sort of
they're doing the
their
same
reputation.
Yeah, they're doing the same thing that the Chinese and the Russians did with the Olympics, just paying more for it. Colby, unfortunately, we got to run, but thank you. You'll be back when Team USA is in the finals.
I'm here for you, my friend.
It's good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you too.
All right, on to Ukraine now. Is Vladimir Putin really feeling the hurt? We've been told yes, but maybe there's some evidence the other way.
No matter how many miles your car has.
My perspective from this was, at this point in the broadcast, before Will Smith sat down, no one knew if the slap was real, And perhaps Jada didn't realize that it was real at that point, and it wasn't until he started yelling that she did. But there's just a lot to unpack here, and it doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon.
No, it doesn't. It keeps going and going and going. Thank you so much, as always, Caitlin. We appreciate it. There are hundreds and thousands, actually, of human traffickers and online child predators across the United States. Where you're watching from tonight, your state is probably crawling with them. And those numbers have only grown during the pandemic. But one TV show is determined to take them all down. Connecticut mother Rue Powell poses online as a teenager to chat with predators. And she's the star of the Discovery Plus show Undercover Underage. Watch.
Well, you are a stranger on the internet. I'm sorry. He said that he is naked and that he can't call me right now. His timing is off. He needs 10 more minutes.
Wow. On the show, which just renewed for a second season, Rue talks to a lot of these creeps and in some cases helps the cops put them behind bars.
I wanted to bring the team's attention to Duke because he was so aggressive.
Hi. Yeah, I'm real.
Yes. Are you almost here? Yeah. I've got eyes on it.
Whatever. Take down.
Rue Powell joins me now. Anti-sex trafficking advocate and the host of the show. We just talked about Undercover Underage, now streaming on Discovery Plus. So how do you You pose as a minor, you're just out doing your thing, and just people just start coming and contacting you out of the blue?
Yeah, so we'll put decoys online, and these are all minors, and we just have normal engagement online like any other teenager would, and these people come to us.
Like chat rooms, you'd go to a chat room or something like that?
Yeah, they're like servers, chat rooms, just different websites where people are congregating and, you know, sharing hobbies or ideas, that sort of thing. Like the very normal places that kids would go online.
All right, so the adults know that these people are underage and they immediately sexualize the conversation?
Yes, so we let them know at the outset how old the minors are, and they might, you know, try to do a little bit of slow grooming, you know, try to build trust, but ultimately the end result is they always want something sexual.
And what do they want? Do they want to set up meetings? Do they want you to send pictures?
Yeah, they want all of those things. They want to maybe set up a meeting to be a hands-on perpetrator. They want to collect images, what we've always known as child pornography, CSAM, child sex abuse material, or they're just looking for a thrill. They are looking for material for self-gratification for the evening.
And then how far do you guys take this? Then do you go with film crews to these meetup locations that you've arranged, and then are police involved with that?
So police are involved from the very beginning. We work with police to make sure that we know the parameters and, you know, what their expectations are. We don't always, you know, go along. A lot of times we just give them the lead and they do an independent investigation. In the clip that you see here, I went down with them.
Unbelievable. And how many people are out there, these creeps, these child sex predators snooping around the internet? They're everywhere, right?
Yes. So there is a study that references the FBI that said maybe 500,000 a day.
500,000 a day?
Don't quote me on that, but that does sound right.
That's
yes.
crazy. I like that the FBI is involved. They should stay involved in that instead of this political garbage, but you're doing a lot of really important work, and thank you.
Thank you.
A red wave is rising ahead of the 2022 midterms. Could we be looking at another Tea Party surge like we did in 2010? We're going to show you some numbers. Plus, primetime goes to spring break.
And yet they're not doing it. So, you know, one person sanctioned by the UK, but not the US so far, is a name that, you know, wide name recognition around the world, Roman Abramovich, right? Owns football teams, involved in the negotiations for peace thus far. But it appears both sides, both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, have sort of said hold off on Roman Abramovich. What do you think should happen to him?
Well, I don't really understand entirely what's happening with Roman Abramovich at the moment, because he seems to have charmed the whole world. Maybe, I don't know, he used some hypnosis or something like that. I don't see any other explanation why everybody all of a sudden fell in love with him. Roman Abramovich is one of the closest and most loyal Putin's oligarchs. He has been around Putin. He has been loyal to Putin for 20 years, more than that probably. He has been Putin's wallet for all of this time. He holds his assets. He bought Putin's first super yacht called Olympia. He contributed to Putin's palace. I mean, like, the list is endless of, just bribes, essentially, that Abramovich has given to Putin. And all of a sudden now he is perceived as a negotiator and as a valid person to be in this room, whereas this whole time his alliances have been very clear. Well, I think that what needs to happen to him is that he needs to be sanctioned in every jurisdiction. I think that people need to get real about him and look at his actions and not at his, and not at some sort of hypothetical scenarios of what might be going on. If Abramovich was against the war, he would have said it, and he didn't say it.
Which is
he would have acted in a certain way, and he didn't. So yeah.
And I should say, of course, we at CNN haven't confirmed your reporting on the yacht, but I know that you have done so much work on him and on everyone else exhaustively over the years. Maria, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And next, we're going to take you to a hospital in Poland delivering babies from Ukrainian refugees who just made it over the border in time. Plus, an Oscar producer reveals just how close Will Smith was to getting arrested after he slapped Chris Rock.
Save up to 70% on your favorite brands at Nordstrom Rack.
Your stomach. Vazolor 325 liquid.
Or is it a matter of political will versus logistical ability?
No, I think one of the things that we heard was that there's very little time between, what being received and getting across into the hands of Ukrainian warfighters, and that was incredibly helpful for us to hear. But of course, we've heard from so many that we have to keep the pressure on. We have to keep supplying lethal aid, humanitarian aid, and we need to just be prepared for what's next. And I think that is the message that we're taking home, is make sure that we keep pace, make sure that the Ukrainians are successful.
Congressman Green, you've been on consistently talking about giving, quote unquote, more lethal aid and more advanced weapon systems. At least the British seem ahead of us on that kind of at every step, whether it's air defense or now with drones. The Times of London, Boris Johnson wants to send deadlier weapons to Ukraine. Admiral Sir Tony Ratigan, Chief of Defense Staff, the war is now a more traditional warfare conflict. These are the kind of drones the British are talking about sending, which are pretty serious weapon systems. Are the British willing to do more than the United States? If so, why?
I don't think so, but clearly that's we got to look at what Boris Johnson offered today. But I agree with what Lori said. The flow from when the weapon systems get to the transition state, the military units that are executing that mission are doing a fantastic job. The other piece of that is getting them to that transition state. That's kind of our challenge. And that's a combination of some bureaucracy at the DOD as well as just struggles with our own military industrial base. And you can't blame that on this administration. That's on our government writ large. We made cuts to our military industrial base, so the diameter of the pipeline, so to speak, is really, really small based on the need that we have right now. So we got to put more weapons in that pipeline. That means we got to make more weapons.
Yeah, there's a math problem. You can make 6,000 javelins a year, at least right now, and the Ukrainians want 500 a day. You make a good point that doesn't get fixed overnight. We saw these pictures, Russian planes carrying nukes over Sweden. The Russian Air Force violated Swedish airspace. Allegedly, there's reporting that some of these planes were carrying nuclear weapons. When you guys were in Ukraine and some of the other NATO countries together, did you get a sense that there were any of the NATO countries that were scared enough of Vladimir Putin they were willing to start either caving or perhaps be a little bit more appeasement-like towards him?
Go ahead, Laura.
Oh, well, I'll start because I think one of the things that was so important about this delegation trip was that it was received so well by our allies. They were so happy that the United States was there on the ground, standing by their side, reaffirming our commitment to Chapter 5. To say that they're anxious would be an understatement. No one knows how far this war criminal, Vladimir Putin, is going to go or what he'll say next. And so I think that is why we are fortifying our, our joint bases that we got to visit in Romania and Poland to see, the exercises on the ground, in the air, with our allied partners, because we are in this together, and our eastern flank is built up to send that message to him.
Congressman, what is it about the war in Ukraine that has managed to break through this partisan divide in D.C.? It's not all the way gone, but the walls seem to have been broken down.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Vladimir Putin, we said this when we were forward with the delegation. He's united NATO, he's united the EU, and he's united the United States Congress. And you can see even with the blocking of the Russian oil purchases, the Democrats actually pushed back on the administration. That bill was run by Democrats. Although there was a race to get the bill in to see who could get it in first, but the Dems got it in, and they pushed back, and the president said, "Hey, will you pull the bill?" And Speaker Pelosi, to her credit, said, "No, we're pushing this through." So the Congress has never, in my brief period here, Lori and I came in together at the same time, has never been this united on an issue.
Yeah, no, naming post offices perhaps, but not as united on an issue as important as this one is.
You didn't see the post office vote last night, then.
You never want to see how the sausage is made. It's great to see both of you. We appreciate you being here. Welcome back home.
Thanks, Leland.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks so much.
We talked about this. How do you actually try and punish Vladimir Putin? Maybe taking his yacht away, where his yacht is, and what we can do about it when we come back.
This is News Nation.
Black pain as it relates to Jada Pinkett Smith in this moment, and to Black women. Was Chris Rock's joke about her shaved head, did it go beyond an insensitivity to her medical condition, alopecia, but did it also hit at issues surrounding Black beauty?
Yes. And I appreciate Mark so much for guiding the conversation in this direction. The decentering of Black women through time has been ubiquitous. We have been maligned and attacked so much that we've internalized these external pressures, these social constructs, and have started to even use them one against each other in the Black community. Calling someone bald-headed in the Black community, critiquing Black women's hair, that is a real red zone, and the language itself is a violent act. Chris Rock should not be exonerated. What he committed on stage was a verbal assault. To minimize it and say it was just a joke is actually treading into dangerous territory, because it gives a kind of cultural permission to that global audience, to people outside the African American community, to commit the same kind of aggressions against Black women, calling them out about their physical appearance, marginalizing the way that they appear. This has been a tool used to oppress Black people through time. And so no one should have permission to do that. It is more than just a joke. So as violent as Will Smith's act was, his slap, and the fact that he should not be exonerated for what he did that night, we need to hold Chris Rock accountable also, and anybody else that would try to attack Black women's appearance.
Professor Neal, you obviously agree that Chris Rock, a comedian, did cross the line in this instance. But I also wonder if you will comment on the irony here. Two of the most high-profile Black men at the Oscars that night, Will Smith and Chris Rock get into this altercation after the Oscars have faced years of criticism. Oscars so white was the hashtag not so long ago. The irony of that, and whether you're concerned something was lost that evening in the midst of so many victories for black talent that evening, including Mr. Smith's.
When you think about some of the campaigns around Oscar So White, it is ironic that this moment, brings upon at least the feeling of shame or some evidence of shame. And I think that shame is legitimate in terms of the way that some black folks, black Hollywood folks, but also nominal black folks who are watching the television show. My concern there is that we can't put too much energy into this notion that we can somehow not have shame on performance, right? We're talking about multimedia culture now, social media. There's so many aspects of what we would call the dirty laundry of blackness that are out there. I think what's more important in this moment is for us to own up to the pain that's occurring in this context, to kind of go from that standpoint, to talk about ways in which we can be much more healthier. And of course, part of the challenge here is that if there were more vibrant and diverse representations of blackness that existed in Hollywood and that were given the kind of kudos that we saw the other night, then we wouldn't feel so unhinged when we have this kind of moment, explode, right? Because it's not as if we haven't seen these examples at Hollywood performances before, where folks, do things that are kind of off script, that kind of break decorum, right? Let's not pretend that this is the first time decorum has been broken at the Academy Awards.
Well, to that point, the Academy is considering disciplinary action today against Will Smith. What do you think of that? And within black spaces, what are some of the ways accountability is being discussed, Professor Yulin?
I would like to see the Board of Governors, the Academy Board of Governors, take this as an opportunity. And instead of resorting to punitive disciplinary actions to hold Will Smith accountable, I think that this is an opportunity for the Academy to do something bold and different. And our healing needs to happen in a way that is restorative around the issues of Black hair, around the issues of Black wellness, around the fact that we are, as Mark Anthony Neal just said, unhinged, not just because of what happened that night and the representations and misrepresentations of Black people through Hollywood, through time. Let the Academy do something that affirms Black life and the value and worth of Jada Pinkett Smith first, and then Chris Rock and Will Smith also.
Mark Anthony Neal, what do you think should be looked at in terms of accountability for either of these men or for the Academy?
I think you own the acts and you deal with the acts as they were, in a way that reflects the nature of the act. We didn't have these conversations, when Adrian Brody a few years ago sexually assaulted an actress on stage. We didn't have these conversations, of course, when you had someone like KSFY, who was facing a rape charge at the time that he won his award. Why is it now that we feel the need to do a better job of scripting these shows and policing people, when it's an act of Black-on-Black crime that occurred on that stage?
Issa Yulin and Mark Anthony Neal, I'm afraid we're out of time and we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining the NewsHour with your insights.
Thank you.
On the NewsHour online right now, the ocean plays a huge role in keeping Earth's climate in check. But as waters warm, it's not clear whether it can keep absorbing as much carbon dioxide. You can learn more on our Instagram page. And that's the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Judy Woodruff. Join us online and again here tomorrow evening for all of us at the PBS NewsHour. Thank you. Please stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by
Cmgus Burger. Kushner was out of the country on January 6th, but of course the committee is also focused on the events leading up to that day and the overall efforts to undermine the election. It's important to note, Kushner appeared voluntarily, and as of now, the committee will not get into specifics about what he shared during his very lengthy deposition, but will say that he provided some information. Now, Aaron, as we know, it's rare for lawmakers to be so tight-lipped, but clearly the committee wants to encourage voluntary participation from people in Trump's inner circle. And we know from our reporting that the committee also wants to speak with Jared's wife, Ivanka. And sources tell us that she is engaging with the committee negotiating a possible appearance. Now, while lawmakers are investigating January 6th, they don't have the power to prosecute people. That, of course, falls to the Justice Department. And so far, the Justice Department, to our knowledge, had been focused on people who actually stormed the Capitol. But CNN has learned the Justice Department, Aaron, has expanded its investigation to begin gathering information about fundraising and organizing for that political rally that preceded the attack on the Capitol, as well as efforts to subvert the Electoral College vote. This is a big development in this investigation, because we have learned that subpoenas have been issued by a grand jury in recent weeks. And again, this is incredibly significant because it comes amid calls for the Justice Department to do more. And this new reporting shows a new stage of the investigation and confirms federal prosecutors are at least looking at a more well-connected political circle.
Paula, thank you very much. And next, new information into CNN about what Will Smith did after he slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars.
When you step into a new day, determined, committed, willing to...
.com or call 1-800.
For me, racism, homeless people. What's the problem in America?
Everything's insanely expensive.
UV is not high enough.
The whole mask thing. The gas prices aren't fun at all.
COVID?
COVID?
Is that still a thing?
Yes, it is.
What do you think Joe Biden's plan to fix all of this is?
I mean, hopefully he has a plan. I don't think he has a plan.
That's not right. Sleepy Joe, I don't really know what he's gonna do. Biden is ruining my day.
Thanks for ruining my life.
I don't know what's going through his mind.
I do not want a president who cannot form a sentence.
It's a right for people to have bad health care.
As a woman, how proud are you of Kamala Harris?
Not proud at all. I'm proud that she's showing. Proudish. I don't really like Kamala Harris.
I think it's sweet that she is in office. So sweet.
How does Kamala Harris make you feel?
I don't even know who that is.
I'm Vice President of the United States.
Tell me about Ukraine. What's going on over there?
War shouldn't even be a thing right now.
They have a lot of friends in the military who are kind of feeling like they're getting prepared to go to war.
Their president is crazy.
Russia should be fine with the land they have.
Stop being so selfish, Jan.
If you were in charge, how would you take on Vladimir Putin?
Oh my gosh, I would hope someone killed him.
I'd give him a knuckle sandwich.
You want a knuckle sandwich?
I would like to have a sit down with him. I would meet his needs. Lock Putin up. I'd like bring him like a fruit basket.
Basket of fruit for the doctor.
What do you want to tell Jesse Waters?
I'm very sorry that you're not here because it's amazing.
Come down to the beach and party with us,
He's in New York.
He's in New York?
He's in New York.
Well, still come down to Florida and party with us, man.
You're fantastic and I love watching you.
It's my world, not yours.
Oh. Time for some text messages. We have Rick from Maine. I wish people cared about Hunter's laptop as much as Will Smith's slap. You're right. Deb, Florida.
Chloe Malas is out front. And Chloe, pretty incredible to hear all this. What more are you learning?
Well, Will Packer also says in this interview, Aaron, that he did not actually speak to Will Smith himself the night of the Oscars. Remember, he was directing the entire show. I've just learned moments ago that earlier this week, Will Smith met with Academy leadership for 30 minutes via Zoom. He apologized once again. The first time was during his Academy Awards acceptance speech. They listened, they heard him out, but then they told him that his actions, the slap against Chris Rock, would have consequences. We know that the Academy has given Will Smith 15 days. On April 18th is when we expect them to have their decision. Could they suspend him expulsion perhaps from the academy, not be allowed next year to come back. Many people wondering, is Will Smith going to speak out, give another statement? Is Chris Rock going to say more at his show tonight? I'm standing right here in Boston in front of the Wilbur Theater, where Chris Rock is going to take the stage once again. I went to both of his shows last night, Aaron, and in the second show, he said that he and Will Smith have not spoken, which is shocking to think that Will Smith has not actually apologized directly to Chris Rock. Aaron?
That's incredible. All right, Chloe, thank you so much for your reporting. And thanks to all of you. AC360 starts now.
Good evening from Ukraine. John Berman here in for Anderson. It has been a significant day at the start of what could become a critical point in the war. We will certainly ask our military analysts about it tonight, but some of the signs are plain to even civilian eyes. Ukrainian troops defending Kyiv continue pushing Russian forces away from the capital, even as a portion, the Pentagon says, about 20%, are leaving on their own. Some have withdrawn from the Chernobyl nuclear power station and disaster site north of the city. The company running it says that Russian troops dug trenches in the highly contaminated isolation zone, received what it says were significant doses of radiation, and, quoting now, panicked at the first sign of illness. CNN cannot independently confirm that, but just imagine the effect on morale, which apparently is poor across the board. Speaking today, the head of Britain's intelligence agency, GCHQ, said, and I'm quoting here, "We've seen Russian soldiers short of weapons and morale, refusing to carry out orders, sabotaging their own equipment, and even accidentally shooting down their own aircraft." Meantime, Vladimir Putin signed the order today, calling up 134,000 draftees for its spring military conscription effort. Many of the enlisted Russian personnel in Ukraine, as you know, are conscripts. That said, for all the Russian losses, especially in and around Kyiv, and signs of Russian redeployment away from the area, they remain an existential threat elsewhere.
Taxes have not gone down. Junkies are everywhere. The cities are still a mess. Joe Biden has been president of the United States for more than a year, and he hasn't fixed any of that. Honestly, he hasn't even really tried to fix it. It's all gotten worse.
Spoken to nearly 600 witnesses and issued 90 subpoenas, gathering evidence and testimony to provide the definitive account of the days and weeks leading up to the attack on the Capitol and the attack itself. And after months of criticism, it appears that as though the Department of Justice is taking some meaningful action in response to the committee's investigation. The unit at DOJ investigating January 6th is reportedly planning to add over 130 more attorneys to pursue prosecutions. And as the Washington Post first reported, the department is expanding the scope of its investigation, now focusing on the Trump allies who planned and funded the Stop the Steal rally at the Ellipse, where Donald Trump, in front of everyone, on national television, incited the insurrection. New York Times is reporting that at least one of the new subpoenas from the Department of Justice mentions certain individuals who have been, quote, classified as VIP attendees at that rally. Again, this is the Department of Justice we're talking about. That indicates the department could be focusing in on Trump's inner circle and the planning around that day, independent of the individuals who ransacked the Capitol.
Depends on how you read exactly what's going on. Thus far, there is no clear evidence that he's pulling all of his forces out of Kyiv.
The Pentagon says those forces are moving into the neighboring country of Belarus, out of the line of fire, where they are resupplying and refitting after taking a beating in their effort to overrun the Ukrainian capital.
The Ukrainians are fighting very, very well, and the Russians are not.
Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby says it's possible the forces could return to the eastern part of Ukraine, shifting their focus to the Donbas region, saying that could lead to a lengthy, more drawn-out conflict.
It would be foolish to try to predict exactly how long this could go.
And Rudbe, going back to that State Department warning, they are saying and telling Americans don't travel to Russia or Ukraine. For those that are already there, they warn, stay alert. Rudbe?
Kelly, thank you. Maria Shovalova is a scholar and lecturer at the National University of Kyiv. She has provided us insight on the ground in Ukraine since the start of the war, and she joins us live now. Welcome. Thanks for being here. I see you're in the dark. Are you taking shelter somewhere?
Hi, thank you for having me. Absolutely. Every night, every Ukrainian should be really careful and spend time in the shelter, as few hours ago there was explosions in Kiev, and actually few hours ago was spreaded misinformation that there is explosions in Lviv. So first we was scared, and in a few minutes we figured out that news was fake. So Russians are keep bombarding us, and also that they keep spreading misinformation that they are more powerful and they are more dangerous. So still informational attacks and real attacks.
Yeah, it's so hard to know. I mean, we're trying to figure it out too from here. So what are you experiencing there? What has the past few days been like for you on the ground?
It's all the same. It's 36th day of the war, and every day it's bomb shelling. Every day we have a news that someone has died. But also we have some positive news, like my friend's mother was in occupied city for 24 days. She haven't spoke with her family, and finally this city was revealed. Ukrainian army got there, and mom of my friend was alive. She gave a call, so that's really great. We can feel that when Ukrainian army comes to Ukrainian cities, some people will love our friends, give us calls, so we are extremely happy to hear that.
What a life, just waiting to hear from people you love and care about, that they're safe. And you talked about this misinformation. Russia, says it's de-escalating. Russia says it's now going to focus on the eastern part of Ukraine. Our government in the U.S. says you can't believe anything they say. Are you hearing from family and friends in the eastern part of the country? What are they telling you?
Everyone is not trusting Russians. We definitely are preparing for worst scenario, because it's our rule. We should be prepared for the worst and hopes for the best. So no one believes Russians.
And you're a lecturer at a university. You have all these students. Are you still able to teach in the middle of this war?
We are still on touch every day. We're chatting with each other and checking, are we alive? Also, I suggested my students, maybe someone need activity and need lessons to feel more emotionally okay, but everyone texted that they are just unable to focus and it's hard to teach. But I get notification from my university that we really hope to renew online teaching from the 4th of April. I have no idea how we will making it, but we will do our best.
Yeah, I know it's your passion, and sometimes people just need any sense of normalcy to try to feel like they can get through something like this. And you have male students, obviously. Are they fighting now? Do you hear from them?
Yes, my student volunteered and joined in the army in the first day because he was a son of Ukrainian soldier. And my university suspended lectures, and in an hour we got notification that he joined army, and my friend made article about him. Of course, his last name wasn't named in case of keeping his privacy, but we made some articles in Ukrainian newspapers about his family stories and how he is doing it, because he is 19 years old and he is defending my home.
Yeah, that must make you really proud of these people who, you're in charge of playing a role in forming their future for your students. And I'm sure they have ambitions and dreams that have now been interrupted by this war.
Exactly, but I'm more shocked that it's happening than proud. So still there is a lot of shock because of everything.
Well, you stay safe. Thank you for taking the time for us. I know it's very dangerous there. It's a really tough time. We appreciate talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
And the U.S. is giving Ukraine a powerful tool to fight this war, but a weapon that many call a game changer on the battlefield is made in a place you'd least expect. Troy, Alabama is home to the Javelin missile, a missile that's wreaked havoc on Russian armor. In fact, since the war began, Russia has lost hundreds of tanks, along with an even larger number of other armored vehicles because of it. News Nation's Janelle Fort is live in downtown Troy tonight. And Janelle, a missile made in this small, quaint town in the south of the United States.
Yeah, Rudabeh, it's definitely not the first place that you think of when you wonder where these vital weapons are being made. And even the people who I spoke with who live here say they're surprised at the big role their small town is playing.
They've become a symbol of resistance on the front lines of the war in Ukraine. The American-made Javelin missile, 46-pound weapon that's small yet lethal, powerful enough to penetrate tanks and shoot down helicopters, and proving to be vital in the country's underdog fight against Russia. A recent post by a defense reporter with the Kyiv Independent shows a line of the missiles in Ukraine with a visible stamp revealing their origin. Joint venture Lockheed Martin, Troy, Alabama, thrusting the small southern town into the spotlight.
I didn't know what was being produced at the Lockheed Martin here, so that's kind of cool that, Javelin missiles. Didn't know we were making those here.
Thomas McConnell has lived in Troy, quiet town about 50 miles south of Alabama state capital in Montgomery, for the past 5 years. The city is known for being home to Troy University, but many are unaware that on its outskirts is Lockheed Martin's Pike County operations facility. Behind the security swinging gates, the company's 350-plus employees perform the final assembly of a variety of U.S. and international missiles, including the Javelin seen in that now viral post.
This place that, there's nothing to do. Our movie theater closed down because of lack of business. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's war in the Ukraine and things produced here in Troy are there. You don't think as a little small town in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, having an effect on the global stage.
The Javelin is considered one of the most sophisticated and powerful anti-tank missiles. The shoulder-fired weapon locks onto its target's thermal picture, then uses a fire-and-forget system, automatically guiding itself to its target after launch, allowing soldiers to fire, then take cover. The Department of Defense says it's sent hundreds of these missiles to Ukraine so far. Last week, Ukrainian President ZELENSKYY making this plea, asking for more. Ukraine needs military assistance without restrictions, as Russia uses without restrictions its entire arsenal against us. Here in Troy, production of the missiles is ramping up with the increased demand. Alabama Governor KSFY tweeting earlier this month, "We want the last thing Putin ever reads to be made in Alabama." Local pride soaring in response to the contribution.
These global events that sometimes we can feel disconnected from really do have an impact in little towns like Troy, Alabama.
Well, the Pentagon says that it's producing these Javelins at full capacity and is looking for ways to boost production even more, which Rudabeh could mean an even fuller plate for those working here in Troy.
It's interesting to trace it all back and see where it comes from. Janelle, thank you. And up next, Ukraine called for help to fight this war, and tens of thousands of people responded from all over the world. So why were some turned away? That's coming up. Plus, imagine renting a car on a family vacation only to be pulled over by police, lights flashing, guns drawn. Those instances could be the focus of a congressional investigation. An exclusive interview with a whistleblower sounding the alarm against Hertz. That's next on NewsNation Prime.
At JP Morgan. There's no point to them. Not a single person is being helped. Politics, in the end, even James Michael Curley, who governed from prison, went out of his way to help people, crook though he was. These people helped nobody. I don't think this can continue. Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, if Joe Biden really is worried about symbols and signs, he could just say to Hunter, please, Hunter, symbolically never use the N-word again. And then Hunter could say, okay, Dad, don't call a senior aide boy, or don't call an African-American journalist a junkie, or you ain't black. That would be a good start. But,
the same event, how do you see it?
So it's a fascinating question because we heard so much frustration from the committee over DOJ's failure to proceed on subpoena issues. And the question is that just DOJ being slow, not in a negative sense, but parsing these important institutional issues? Because these subpoenas don't just stand on their own. DOJ doesn't make a decision about whether to enforce these or not, and then the issue goes away. There will be future subpoenas issued to future members of future White Houses and future executive branch employees. And DOJ has to be methodical and careful in making sure that it uses rigorous standards and careful analysis in deciding which subpoenas to enforce and which subpoenas not to. And perhaps, Chris, less in making that decision, because many of these subpoenas should be enforced, but perhaps in how they reach that decision. So there's that issue. And then the question is whether there's some interplay with what we now know to at least be a grand jury investigation where DOJ is issuing some subpoenas. And could that, for instance, interfere in the case of Mark Meadows, the former White House chief of staff? Do you want to go ahead and prosecute him for obstruction when you're looking at substantive charges? And the answer might be yes. It might be that you want something to hold over his head and flip him to use as a witness. It might also be a good reason for DOJ to exercise some restraint.
Yeah, you know, I hadn't thought of that. It's a good point, and obviously the sort of developments that have been uncovered by reporters in the last few days shed some new light on that. I do wonder, Betsy, it does seem like we are down to a small group of holdouts. I mean, Ivanka Trump is going back and forth with the committee. It's notable that her husband came in and cooperated. Of course, there's a big difference because he's on a plane back from the Middle East on the day that, by all accounts, she's in close contact to her father and perhaps seen as this kind of vessel to persuade him to do something.
Yeah, that's right. While Jared Kushner was on a plane on history's best timed Middle East trip, Ivanka was in the president's private dining room with him, watching him watch the chaos on TV. The level of information that she has is just exponentially larger, exponentially higher quality than the level of information that Jared has. Of course, Jared Kushner would know what his wife told him. He would know what people who were there told him. He would know what happened before and after the attack. But lots of people, frankly, also would know stuff that fits into those baskets. Only Ivanka knows what she saw when she was in that room. I think if she testifies, it might be the single most consequential witness that the committee would be able to secure. And of course, the fact that her husband is playing ball is something that's ground, no question, for a lot of optimism for committee investigators, but it doesn't mean it's game over. And remember, there are lines that the committee so far has been unwilling to cross. They asked Sean Hannity politely to share information with them. We don't know if he's shared information with them or not. There's no sign that there's been any subpoena issued. Of course, they asked Republican members of Congress to share information. Those members have been vociferous about the fact that they will not share information with the Select Committee. The committee hasn't subpoenaed them. So even though they're being very aggressive and gathering lots of information, there are still some areas where they're being lower C, a little bit conservative. And the question is, do they get even more aggressive in the final months?
All right, Betsy Woodruff Swan, Joyce Vance, thank you both. Really appreciate it. Don't go anywhere. There's a new Biden plan to lower gas prices, and Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm is here to explain what we can expect just ahead, plus what we know about what's happening inside the Russian army, as a top UK official says Putin massively misjudged his war. The latest after this.
I've got moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now there's Sky Rizzy.
Things are getting clearer. I feel free to bare my skin.
Blood spatter. When test
created local agents to sell your home for as low.
No. Why won't my Democratic colleagues from border states or anywhere else in the country say they believe that we ought to enforce Title 42? Because guess what? There are a few senators who have said so. Isn't that right?
There's a few senators. I think there's a few representatives that said so too. Now, they can put their money, so to speak, where their mouth is. You can say it, but you can take some action. That talk is cheap, right? Take some action and walk down there and sign the paper. And once one does, maybe a few more will, because their constituents, their bosses, their citizens, their communities are being wrecked too.
And it is a way to wrestle control of the people's house away from a handful of self-anointed individuals who are wrecking this country in the name of so-called democracy. My gentleman, my friend from Virginia, agree.
Absolutely. You mentioned Secretary Mayorkas. He has said the border is secure. The border is secure, he has said, when, as you know, we have lost operational control of our border. The Mexican crime cartels are making hundreds of millions of dollars a month off sex trafficking, drug trafficking, child trafficking, human trafficking, you name it. Everything that comes across that border comes under the control of the Mexican crime cartel. There's no humane component to it. They're finding dead bodies at the border of people who were trying to, they got, starved or they are dehydrated or they just couldn't make the journey or something happened to them on the way. And you talked about Remain in Mexico policy. Instead of Remain in Mexico policy, the MPP that was in place under the Trump administration, here we've got our own, we've got the United Nations using our own resources that we pay the United Nations to help illegals cheat our asylum system. So the United Nations is taking resources that the United States is giving to them to use to train illegals on how to cheat our asylum system and how to gain access into our country by claiming asylum.
Carson, timeout.
Who calls a timeout in this game?
Me, I'm icing the kicker.
Really?
It'll give us more time to talk about First Western Bank and Trust.
Like our convenient online banking.
Hold on, I can do something.
Turning up.
Reestablished personnel strengths. That's going to be very difficult, truthfully. Russia's got a hard row to hoe in the next couple of weeks to try and put these units that I would suggest, there's been the number of 10%, 15% losses. In those main combat units, I'm going to suggest that it's a lot higher than that, even close to 40 or 50%. So what you're talking about is trying to get forces that were in contact out of there. They're defending the areas with artilleries and rockets and missiles to keep the Ukrainians in one place. But this repositioning of forces is getting back into Belarus and trying to get out of the front lines is going to take a very long time, weeks, if not months.
Yeah, look, you look at all the destruction in Cristiano Mapora's piece, tank after tank after tank. It's easy to think it might be more than 10 or 15% losses. General Zwack, in his nightly address, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy announced that he had removed 2 generals who were serving in the security service of Ukraine, the main intelligence security agency of the Ukrainian government, calling them anti-heroes who, quote, have not decided where their homeland is. He didn't give any specifics there, but how do you interpret that?
I think we have to look at the entire, if you will, Russia, Ukraine breakup of the Soviet Union, and there were leftovers, if you will, from that period, and were overwhelmingly the bulk of the Ukrainians that came from that era, their military and their security services. There may very well be a few sympathizers in there, or may be affected by the carnage. So I buy that, that he may have a few informers, if you will, in his Ukrainian intelligence service, which, by the way, has been doing incredibly well by all accounts.
Yeah, John, if I can add to that, because Peter brings a very good point. My counterpart in Ukraine when I was commanding in Europe was a guy named Vorobyov. In a session over a couple of beers one night, he told me his biggest problems was getting rid of some of the old high-bound Soviet officers that had been trained in Russia in his force. That was one of his major concerns. I got to get rid of these guys because they're corrupt and they're more loyal to Russia than they are to Ukraine. So I think that's something like we're seeing right now, and Peter's seen that for sure in eastern Ukraine.
That's interesting. General Zwack, let me put this to you. Ukrainian officials say there are no longer any Russian troops at the Chernobyl power plant. They've transferred control of the plant to Ukraine. Russian forces earlier in this conflict showed very little regard for safety when it came to radiation or nuclear plants. But what does this move, backing off from Chernobyl, General Zwack, say to you?
Well, I think General Hertling would say this is all about the Russians have taken them 5 weeks. We have a phrase in the Army, taking care of soldiers. And they have been driving through there because one of the main roads to the front in Kyiv goes right out of Belarus through there. And you've had troops on the site of Chernobyl, that have been basically, keeping the staff there a bit under the gun. So yeah, it's a mess. And I think that you've got reports anecdotally about troops that are complaining and don't want to be. They're getting sick, and that's creating a problem. And I think now the Russians are forced to address it. Bottom line, they haven't taken care of their people to let them go through for 5 weeks the way they're doing, or even be garrisoned or staffed there.
Yeah, just one more example of that. General Zach, General Hartling, thank you both very much.
Sure, John.
And just ahead, we're going to discuss Putin's strategy for peace talks and whether Russia will honor that humanitarian corridor scheduled to open tomorrow out of Mariupol.
Bro trip. If you book with Priceline, you'll save more, so you can bro more.
Bro. 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 Bro.
Good thing you saved on the trip. Priceline. Every trip is a big deal.
Ashley has seasonal savings in-store and online. For a limited time, get 10% off store-wide. Plus, lots of styles are in stock and ready to deliver. And special...
Any other campaign done it, they would have fined them to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. But I'll take this as a start. But the biggest takeaway is the Hillary Clinton campaign broke federal law by taking political contributions and paying a foreign asset to gin up dirty Russian information that was fake, that they funneled into the FBI to falsely surveil President Trump under illegal warrants issued by the federal surveillance court.
So the whole thing was a scam. It was illegal. They'd been fined for it. It wouldn't have worked unless the entire Washington press corps abetted it, went along with it, reported the stuff as true, and it was fact. It was just another set of campaign lies. It was Oppo. Has anybody apologized for their roles in this?
I don't think those 51 intel analysts, heads of the CIA that called Hunter Biden's laptop Russian disinformation have apologized. They actually doubled down and said they were glad to give the warning, even though they've been proven wrong. Hillary Clinton and the Steele team and Fusion GPS have not apologized, even though her lawyers for the campaign have been indicted by special counsel John Durham. So federal indictments, federal fines showing corruption and a breaking of the federal law is not enough for the mainstream media to come around and say not only did they get it wrong, but they got it so wrong that they need to be calling out the Hillary Clinton campaign and now probably Joe Biden or actually his son Hunter, because these people have been corrupting the media for decades. And they are supposed to be the bastions, the dynastic bastions of the Democratic Party, and they have failed in upholding the principles of the law, which you and I have reported on for so long.
Well, and they prevented us from having a free and fair election in 2020 by suppressing information voters needed to know. And the people who did that, those 51 former Intel officials, all still have their security clearances, which they use to make millions. They trade on those clearances. Why do they still have their security clearances? They don't work for the government anymore. They work for MSNBC.
That's a great point, and it's not
and I was about 39 when the Soviet Union, which looked like a monolith, you know, for inside and outside, all of a sudden crumbled and was dissolved. Thanks God we succeeded to do it peacefully at that time, but it crumbled just like that, you know, in a year time. We were surprised. I was surprised. I was an active participant of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, but it came as a surprise even to me.
It's a really good.
So you never know what they actually think and what they will do.
Yeah, it's a great point, and a really useful historical reminder, Andrei Kozyarev. Thank you very much.
Thank you, son.
His book, Firebird, The Elusive Fate of Russian Democracy, is available everywhere. When we come back, President Biden announces a historic effort to bring down gas prices. I'll ask Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm what it means and how quickly it will take effect right after this.
Our family budgets, your family budgets, to fill a tank, none of it should hinge on whether a dictator declares war. So today I'm laying out a two-part plan, not only to ease the pain that families are feeling right now, but to end this era of dependence and uncertainty.
Welcome to Sling TV's Fan Freakout Zone, where basketball fans are free to watch and let it all out. Check out our trash talk tape.
You're crying. Nobody needs it. You're overrated, Chad.
And her team is winning. Here's the mascot massage room where you can relax during tense games.
Oh, I love you, Lobster.
This is our busted bracket break room. We're gonna need more TVs.
Oh, yeah.
Let it all out when you watch with Sling. The basketball you love at a price you'll love. Try it today.
Thousands of years ago, even if you were sitting at the top, you really couldn't count on support. It took centuries for office seating to evolve, but there were some major holes in the design. Then people were inspired to do away with office chairs completely. Yeah, that didn't work. in 2020.
On the scheduled due date. Francis Malfi is an attorney representing over 250 Hertz customers suing the company over false arrest. We caught up with him on Capitol Hill as 2 senators have now asked for congressional investigation.
Hertz made it clear that unless a court or Congress makes them change their ways, they're not going to do so. And that's why we've met with many congressional offices and committees to get broad support on both sides of the aisle. To make
the former federal agent we spoke with says that's exactly what's needed.
If the country knew how our taxpayer dollars and our police system is being used, I promise you, I'm sure more legislators would probably get involved in stopping this.
Now, Daniel Stokes, the former Hertz employee you just heard from in this piece, when I asked him why he came forward, he said, look, I realized the severity of the problem when this actually happened to me. And he says he was out on medical leave. He had a Hertz car. He was ultimately arrested and prosecuted for embezzlement.